Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to support you in finding peace with food and overcoming disordered eating. So I'm going to talk today about a therapist perspective of inside an NHS inpatient anorexia nervosa treatment centre. So I worked as a therapist in an NHS adult eating disorder service on and off between house moves, babies and life between 2004 and 2023. So I have got a recent podcast on this topic and also a recent Substack article on it. So if you just scroll back a couple of episodes, a couple of posts, you'll be able to find that if you want to dive into that. But in this article, I'm going to talk specifically about the inpatient experience. So my role was predominantly in outpatient services, but I also saw inpatients who were spending anything from 3 months to a year receiving intensive recovery support for anorexia nervosa. And this included psychiatry, psychology, nutrition, and refeeding meal support, exercise management, plus many additional therapeutic groups. So here I'm going to share 9 reflections from my experience. So number 1, choice or force. So thankfully, for 99% of individuals, patients are not forced into hospital against their own will. And on rare occasions, if someone is extremely unwell and possibly at risk of death, then they will be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. So this means basically being detained in hospital for treatment because someone is considered to be a danger to themselves or others, and they are unable to make wise decisions about their treatment. And essentially, this is a last resort to preserve life. So even though most patients are choosing to opt for treatment, they might feel deeply ambivalent about this decision. So they may feel terror about eating. Simultaneously, they may feel a sense of deep relief. The torture of starvation and relentless routines has been stopped by surrendering to an authority which they wouldn't have permitted themselves. Now, people often feel they have to become extremely ill and reach a rock bottom before they will even think about going into hospital. Very sad nature about the illness anorexia nervosa. You can never really be sick enough for the illness. It is ruthless. But by choosing to accept the help, this is an essential component of motivational approaches to helpfully engage someone in the healing process. So when you're working motivationally, you're really wanting someone to opt in and take responsibility and feel empowered in the treatment process rather than like forcing or doing something to someone. So in contrast, if someone is forced into a corner, it doesn't usually produce effective results, either downright rebellion or pleasing. People will literally talk about eating just to get out and then they'll just relapse again. Now, I think important just caveat to say here is that I think just being on an inpatient ward is always going to be a bit of a controlling experience, and it does kind of need to be to serve the purpose of people being able to be refed. But I guess within that whole system, staff are really trying to come at things from a motivational viewpoint and to give people choice in the whole process. So ideally, a hospital admission should be the last call when outpatient therapy is inadequate and someone is spiralling downwards. And where possible, outpatient community support is preferable to minimise life disruption and to encourage responsibility in recovery. So usually most services will really try and give someone a good kind of go at outpatient therapy first, and then if they're still really losing weight and really not doing well, then they might be looking at inpatient treatment. Okay, number 2, types of eating disorders. So in the USA, patients of all body shapes and sizes with differing eating disorders diagnoses are treated together. And I see much value in this approach because struggles with food can include all kinds of eating behaviours with the underlying core issues being similar. So body weight is irrelevant. So even if you're really underweight or you're really overweight or you're normal weight, but you're struggling with food, often the core issues are all things around not feeling good enough, things that happened in your childhood, not feeling worthy, having a very disordered relationship with food. Now, in the UK, it is usually only patients with anorexia nervosa that access inpatient hospital treatment. Now, this comes with its drawbacks because anorexia is a deeply competitive illness, and placing many sufferers in one location can amplify competition and the sharing of dysfunctional food habits. People talk about picking up all kinds of dysfunctional learning from going into hospital. Number 3, beds. Historically, particularly in the pandemic, there was a distinct lack of hospital beds for eating disorder patients, meaning that individuals could be sent far away from their families and support system, and this caused intense distress for everyone involved. Now, at least in adult services, this is happening less. So patients should be able to access support geographically close to home, but the speed of accessing the right support is still sometimes slow and arduous. So the aim ideally is for someone to be assessed early on in their eating disorder journey and then to be offered therapy, dietetic support and risk management as an outpatient. So this enables the person to continue with their education, work, structure and relationships, to stay in touch with friends and the fabric of day-to-day life that offers belonging and meaning. But sometimes an inpatient stay is the only viable option when anorexia has a very tight grip. And sadly, too many people reach this stage due to late diagnosis and misunderstandings about eating disorders. But I think things are slowly improving with this. Number 4, pros and cons of inpatient treatment. Inpatient support can feel like the saviour, the helicopter rescue to safety when lost in the depths of the jungle. And when someone is too unwell physically and entrenched in the coping of the eating disorder, they need the intensity and help that only inpatient can offer. But it is not a magic pill or cure. Hospital can sometimes amplify the positive identity issues around an eating disorder and can expose people to learning unhelpful habits. The inpatient stay offers 24-hour monitoring and rigorous support around eating and routines. Patients receive therapy, dietetic support and occupational health intervention. And this can be transformative and life-changing as skills are relearned. But the downsides of inpatient are also worth noting. The removal of people from the normality of day-to-day life can result in them becoming institutionalised and the ED characteristics becoming entrenched. Anyone who has experienced a lack of emotional or physical care early in life will find the inpatient ward offering cosy, wrapped up in cotton wool type bliss as responsibilities are removed and attentive care is sort of present all the time. Now, not to say that an inpatient stay is blissful by any means. It's hugely challenging on many levels, and patients can simultaneously feel drawn to the care whilst also feeling like quite overwhelmed and kind of controlled and smothered, which can be, really kind of horrible. Number 5, the ward round. Ward round happens at least once a month for each patient during the admission. And this is a time when all the professionals, family members and patient come together and meet to review progress. So it can be taxing and useful in equal measure. There is a pressure to show that treatment is working, to accelerate departure from the ward and to grant privileges. It can be anxiety-provoking and intense for patients, although not intended this way. And as a therapist, I would frequently attend to give therapy feedback. I always enjoyed this opportunity to uplift and encourage my patients, as this experience could often become very weight numbers focused as the barometer of worth. Number 6, transition to the community and family support. Families are a hugely important part of the recovery process, and many patients return to their family home post-treatment. And it's incredibly stressful for families to deal with a loved one struggling with anorexia nervosa. So the new Maudsley animal model, and I've done a podcast on this if you want to dive more into this, provides a framework to support loved ones to support helpfully in recovery. The model offers guidance within a framework of empathy, listening and encouragement. Now, I think with supporting someone with an eating disorder as well, as a parent, you can really, with great intentions, get drawn into unhelpful ways of helping. It's so easily done because it's so stressful. So the new Maudsley animal model is a great sort of toolkit to help you stay in that more helpfully helping place. So in most instances, ongoing therapy and dietetic support are offered post-discharge. And this is a crucial part of the journey, as it's an intense shock to move from hospital environment to going alone. And in preparation for discharge, patients will be given home leave and incrementally longer periods at home to adjust. Number 7, hiding food and falsifying weight. Predictably, there are dramas and mishaps on an anorexia inpatient ward. People with anorexia are adept at secretive exercise and the hiding of food. And food is covertly thrown out of the windows at mealtimes or hidden in handkerchiefs or up sleeves. And secretive room pacing is not uncommon. Frustrations can run incredibly high, as anorexia is a ruthless and unforgiving illness, and patients will sometimes falsify their weight by drinking copious amounts of water or hiding weights in their underwear. And people will sneak off the premises for walks if they can get away with it. I think it's just worth saying really that these are all very normal, expected behaviours. Anorexia is a coping strategy. It's a way that people feel very, very safe. It's a way that they feel good by restricting food. So it's very understandable that people are going to be looking for ways to kind of get around the inpatient rules and get up to all kinds of mischief at certain times. And staff are very aware of this and I think manage it incredibly well. So let's talk a bit about staff. Number 8. So working in the eating disorder service can be incredibly stressful and overwhelming for staff. The hours are long and the patient dynamics can be complex. Nursing staff often make up the bulk of the workforce on an inpatient ward. And nurses don't tend to get therapeutic supervision as therapists do. And this means that they can be left emotionally exhausted and carrying a huge weight of responsibility. And therefore, staff turnover is high and temporary staff often fill the posts. And this can be extremely disruptive for patients in their continuity of care. And number 9, conveyor belt. Thankfully, for most patients, 1 or 2 admissions is enough to support someone to shift and move beyond an acute eating disorder diagnosis. Someone is not cured, though, through weight restoration alone. It is an ongoing journey to heal and to find new ways of coping. And although patients do receive therapy whilst on the ward, in most cases, it is likely that they will need ongoing support post-admission or later on. And some patients do end up having multiple admissions, them having mixed feelings about this. The inpatient ward can offer a familiar, safe haven to escape to when life feels overwhelming, and the ward can feel over-controlling and prison-like, so it's quite a mixed bag. It's often not helpful for someone to have too many hospital admissions, as they can become institutionalised and disconnected from real life. For a minority of people as well, they may live with chronic anorexia nervosa in the community, but managing symptoms and receiving GP support. And when I worked in the service as well, some people that had been living a lifetime with anorexia nervosa, would sometimes kind of come in for a top-up admission for just a few weeks, but it was not seen as very beneficial to have someone in continuously, because I think, again, someone becomes very institutionalised. I like to think as well that nowadays, with better eating disorder support, better early intervention, people getting support more in their teens and 20s or whenever the eating disorder first develops, it's more likely that people can fully recover from anorexia and things can be turned around. I think sadly back in the day, there just wasn't the help available. And then when I was working in the service, sometimes people would be coming for treatment, maybe for the very first time in their 40s and 50s, when they'd already lived like almost half their lives with an eating disorder, if not more. And then, of course, it is more difficult to turn things around when you've lived with an illness for that long. But I have to say it's never too late. I know people that have recovered from an eating disorder after 30 years. So, yeah, we always have to be hopeful. So do you relate? Have you had experience of treatment within an NHS inpatient eating disorder service? And have there been particularly positive or negative experiences you had? I would love to know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _ For further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'll be so grateful if you follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.